welcome. I am so pleased that you're here, and welcome to the Miracle of Facilitation, specifically about facilitating evolutionary mystic meditation, but really it is the art and science and skill of facilitating anything and everything. So I'm so pleased you're here. If you can hear me and see my screen, if you would just type a Y or a yes into the chat box, that'd be great. And also, I am broadcasting from the shadow of downtown Houston. So where in the world are you today? And somebody recently asked me, one of my friends said, what does that mean in the shadow of downtown Houston? And so literally it is a 15-minute bike ride from my home to Houston's City Hall in downtown Dallas. So great. So I see Dave and Chris say yes. You can hear me. And Chris, I know, is newly transplanted from Ohio to Texas. So welcome to our great big state of Texas. And Eliane is from Brazil. So hello and welcome. And hello, son. Hello, darling. Great for you to be here from the Pacific Northwest. I think it's Portland, I believe, if memory serves me. Mickey from Tokyo. Oh, my goodness. Welcome. So I'm so pleased you're here. So we're going to just dive in and get started. And there we go. So the Miracle of Facilitation. And again, I want you to hold this in the framework. Yes, this is a program and a webinar and a training on facilitating evolutionary mystic meditation, but it really will help you if you're facilitating any kind of work, whether it's healing work, therapeutic work, teaching, training, as you begin to sort of get a sense of how broad and then how important it is to be really centered and grounded as you present. So, okay. So we've done that. That's great. And I just want to just take a few minutes to introduce myself. I know some of you know me really, really well. Some of you just spent 3 days with me for our Evolutionary Mystic Experience 2020. We did a very intensive 3-day meditation retreat together. But I help spiritual seekers to embody their true self, realize their soul purpose and their soul destiny, so that they can have the impact in the world that they are destined to make. And I'm the author of Body Brilliance, Mastering Your 5 Vital Intelligences. It was the #1 health and wellness bestseller. It reached, I think, number 7 on the top 100 books in Barnes & Noble, and went on to win 2 National Book of the Year awards that year. And I have served on the Center for Integral Wisdom Board of Directors for 2 years with Ken Wilber, John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, Barbara Marks Hubbard, who was on the board at that time. She is now crossed that rainbow bridge. John Gray, Jack Canfield, Sally Kempton, Michael Beckwith, Mark Gaffney. So a number of illuminaries, and we were dedicated to changing the source code of humanity, evolving humanity and consciousness together. So I'm going to really just give you my very best. You know, I promised we'd be together for 90 minutes. And, you know, I'm going to just shoehorn everything that I know about being a facilitator and being a really good one into our time together. And then there'll be an invitation, and there'll be lots of time for Q&A. If you hear a question that you would like to answer, just please enter it into the chat for me. So let's start with the end in mind here. So my work is really about helping you become an evolutionary mystic, that in your soul of souls, you are already and always an evolutionary mystic. Now, with a lot of fun, I like to call that a badass mystic. You can call it a radical saint or a revolutionary sage or a rascally seer. It doesn't much matter what you call a human being who's on that evolutionary edge and who is a free functioning, fully integrated human being. It's the absolute edge of humanity, a human being at its physical, emotional, mental, moral, spiritual edge, and really on the edge of what's capable for a human being. And that's really what we're going to speak about today. Now, how does that sound to you? You know, being your absolute best possible human being you can be with all of your skills absolutely available to you, all of the different parts of you fully integrated, and as each moment and circumstance arises, you can respond to it skillfully and practically, with, serenity, with love, with compassion, with presence, even with joy and pleasure and laughter. So here are, you're going to notice I have already put the link to today's slides in the chat. Stuck at the top of the chat is a link where you have all these slides already. So you'll have them, you can follow along with them, you can watch the slideshow here. But there's about 15 qualities of the evolutionary mystic, the badass mystic, the human being that's at the edge of evolution. And these are just a few of my favorites. As a badass mystic, you stand your sacred ground with presence. And I love Brene Brown's prayer, please help me stand my sacred ground without puffing up or without shrinking. As a badass mystic, you speak your truth with love. You set boundaries with courage and kindness. You do your 100% best at every turn. You're able to cut through chaos with clarity. Would you say that tends to be a lot of chaotic energy in the world today? And when you're really centered in your power and your presence, you can cut through that chaos with clarity. You meet crisis with creativity. You make money completely aligned with your divine purpose. You dance, laugh, and love with delight. And you are always in wonder at the mystery with awe. And so this is the human being that we all have the potential of being in our own unique ways. But then it's also you are able to develop the skill to facilitate these qualities and characteristics in the people that you love and care for the most. If you're a professional, or a teacher or a therapist or a coach, or a healer of some kind, you have the capacity already inherent within you to bring this out of yourself and the people in your life. And the metaphor that I use the most comes from Michelangelo. I used it in the email today. When he would see a huge, big, giant slab of marble, he said, I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set it free. Every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it. And so for a good facilitator, it is the ability to see in another human being what is already always there, who they are as their truest self and their soul purpose and their soul destiny, and then help them to transmute the resistance that they have within their own body, within their own life, to really embodying that true self, embodying their soul purpose, embodying their divine destiny. So there is an art and there's a science to facilitating evolutionary mystic meditation. And I want to talk about the art first, and then we'll move into the science. And I'm just going to check, is there any questions from anyone? So Nancy from Nevada. Hey, Nancy. Kelly from Maine. Sydney from upstate New York. Wonderful. So any comments? Oh, we have another Brazilian, Anna dear. Wonderful. Welcome. All right, great. Any comments or questions before we dive in? Okay. All right. So, as we dive in, I just want to explain that evolutionary mystic meditation is something that I was gifted. It was a download that I was given. I've done a tremendous amount of work over the years with Margaret Lynch. I had the pleasure of helping her to design and launch her 7 levels of wealth manifestation way back in, I think, 2011. And I was there at her very first Rockstars on a Mission, Ignite Your Power live event. And I was watching her do shadow work with like 160 people in the room. And I'd never seen shadow work. I'd always seen shadow work done one-on-one. I'd never seen it done group in a hotel ballroom and with tapping. And as I was tapping along with Margaret, I received a download of how to integrate my fascinations, my life's work, all the things that I had been studying up until that point, which would evolve into evolutionary mystic meditation. And so I stand on the shoulders of giants saying that it's a synthesis of Carl Jung's active imagination. And I've been studying Carl Jung since 1979. I consider myself a Jungian from a Western psychological, psychiatric perspective. Voice Dialogue by Hal and Sidra Stone. That should be Stone singular. And in 1994, I did a years-long every week doing voice dialogue therapy here in Houston. And then in 94, I did a 2-year program, one-on-one tutoring with Ann Lassiter. And part of that was working with the voices within the body, and particularly voices of pain and the emotions that were underneath the pain that were held in the body. In 2006, I did work with Big Mind, Big Heart by Genpo Roshi, and I studied for almost 3 years with him to be a facilitator of that work. EFT tapping, deep shadow work, and my own body brilliance somatic work. So those are the elements that primarily make up what I now call evolutionary mystic meditation. And I've really distilled it and streamlined it so that, one, people can have a great experience. They can really, in 30 or 40 minutes, move into their infinite, eternal, and immortal self. And then for people who do want to learn to facilitate it, it's really been simplified and streamlined. So the art of facilitating evolutionary mystic meditation, it really is about all the different parts that live within us. And I like the metaphor of the boarding house. There are a lot of metaphors to talk about the parts or subpersonalities or voices that make up our psyche. And psyche is the old Greek word. It simply means soul. But in more modern times, it is really about our psychological makeup, who we are within us. Some of the metaphors that people use are like an orchestra or a chorus or a corporation or a boardroom. I like the metaphor of a boarding house, and that different parts of us live on different levels of the boarding house. Now, on the penthouse, starting at the top, that's our soul team. And those are the parts of us that can really help us open and access the infinite and eternal and immortal parts of our being. What classic enlightenment, what the mystics, particularly from the Eastern traditions, have been saying for literally thousands of years. Underneath the penthouse, that second floor of the boarding house, that's our success team. And that's the part of us that have really learned to thrive and succeed in our world. And I would venture to say that most of us listening to this call are highly successful and functional in your lives. And these are the parts of you that have helped you, complete certifications, degrees, really master different things in your life. The ground floor is really that part that helps you just function in the world. Your physical self, your emotional self, your mental, your spiritual self, all those are right there. And then in the basement is the parts of us that I call resistance. Now, some people might call that shadow, but it's the parts of us that are completely committed to safety and security. They're the often unconscious parts of us that are there. And the metaphor that the Buddha used, that I love so much, for this sort of boarding house process, he used the elephant and its rider. And the elephant is the unconscious, and the rider, which is called the mahout, is the conscious mind. And so if a mahout is very skillful, he can maintain control of the elephant. But the minute the mahout loses control, you can imagine that that elephant weighing thousands of pounds is going to go off in the direction that it wants, whether that's peanuts or straw or vegetation or roll in the mud or whatever. And so our resistance team are the parts of us that are dedicated to keeping us safe and to make sure that we don't put ourselves in harm's way. And so the art of facilitation is one to really create and dialogue with all these different parts. And so that art of facilitation, really focuses on these basics. And again, whether you're talking about my evolutionary mystic meditation or you're facilitating anything, it's like one, setting your intention. What is my intention for this session? Whether it's a one-on-one session, a group session, a training of some kind, setting your intention and inviting your client or your group to have their intention. And then from our perspective, shifting into a voice, knowing that with intention, we can actually move into and experience these different parts, their energies, where they feel localized in the body, their worldview, their perspective, what are the emotions that drive them, what are the emotions they're most afraid of, what do they want for the self. There's a wealth of knowledge that can be gained by shifting in and speaking to these parts. And just asking very specific, gentle questions, and then listening and affirming that part. And then I combine the EFT tapping as a part of that affirmation process. And then once we've completed dialoguing with the part, then we bring it back to the body. We bring it back to center, and we sense the body, center the body, and help it begin to reintegrate that part. So often when we start to work with the boarding house of selves, that there'll be a lot of selves that are really moving to some new success, some achievement, some beloved goal, but there's conflict. And so the resistance in the basement is having a tug of war with the other parts who want to continue to move and grow and evolve. And there's the other parts in the basement going, nope, not so quick. And I can tell you, 10 times out of 10, the resistance team, your defense team, is going to win. And so just by dialoguing with the parts, we can really begin to get to understand them, bring them into consciousness, and then start to bring them into harmony together. And so where there was a tug of war, where there was battle, where there was conflict, all of a sudden there starts to be more harmony. And the parts that seem like antagonists fighting against each other, all of a sudden start to evolve and heal and grow into allies. And so rather than this tremendous amount of energy being spent in battle within ourselves and conflict within ourselves, stirring up so many different emotions and sensations, then all of a sudden we become much more congruent. We become more centered. We become more whole. So this is just an image that I use to really symbolize that fully integrated human being, where the parts are really coming into harmony together. So the art of facilitating evolutionary mystic meditation is understanding, one, the depth and the breadth of all these different parts that live in the boarding house, and how to speak to them directly, and how to connect them and start to harmonize them. But here is what makes evolutionary mystic meditation happen at light speed. Lots of bodies of work, voice dialogue, active imagination, a lot of Jungian analysis, internal family systems, NLP. There's lots of them that do parts work. But what makes this unique and what makes this healing process happen at light speed is that when we can connect to the infinite, eternal, immortal parts of ourselves, of our soul and beyond, and experience that through our body. And then when we can connect the parts of our defense team, our success team, and our soul team with those infinite energies, the ability to presence them and heal them and bring them into harmony is amplified exponentially. And so it's an amazing thing to experience your true self. I mean, it is you and it's your soul coming home. But then tapping that energy of your soul to heal those parts of you that are still in the basement, that are still contracted in fear, is an amazing, amazing skill. And just like I said, healing starts to happen at light speed. So before we move into the science, I just want to check in. Are there questions or comments? Okay. It's Nancy says, please redo the link to the slides. It doesn't show up if people logged on after it was originally posted in the chat. Well, it's actually, there's a sticky chat. I mean, I'll repost it, but there's a post that's called a sticky post up there. And then I just re-entered it right there. So, okay. So any comments or questions about the art of facilitation and all of these amazing different parts? The one thing I would add before we move into the science is that one of the differences in this work, and that's very much in alignment with, yeah, Mickey, it's okay if you haven't experienced your evolutionary mystic meditation yet. I can send you to recordings of it so that you can experience it for sure. Because it's an amazing experience. The thing that is so unique about this work, I remember I interviewed Deepak Chopra a number of years ago as a journalist. I got to interview a lot of, celebrity spiritual people. Deepak Chopra, Gene Houston, Carolyn Mace, Marianne Williamson, Andrew Harvey, Ram Dass, a lot of the great spiritual luminaries. And in my interview with Deepak, he was talking about the ego and being the multi-headed hydra. The hydra is, from Greek mythology, that when you would cut off the head of a hydra, two more would in its place. And Deepak was saying the ego is like the hydra. You've got to kill the hydra. You've got to destroy the ego. You've got to annihilate the ego. And from our perspective, it's like, no, we love all of our parts. We come to realize that some of those parts in the basement came online very young, and their skill sets are very limited and stunted in many ways. And they're still trying to do their job of keeping us safe and alive and surviving, but with a very limited toolkit. And so part of the work is one bringing that infinite unconditional love to those parts. So one, they can begin to open and heal and flower, and they can up-level their skill sets. So So, Dolores, that's a great question, and it's a good time to answer it. What is the difference between your soul and your higher self? I'm going to show an image in a minute that I think will illustrate it, and I'll come back to this, Dolores. But really, to me, there's the incarnate self. And if we want to use the 7 chakras as a way of sort of looking at and measuring it, the lower 3 chakras, the first, second, and third, the pelvic bowl, the hara or the dantian and the belly, and then the third chakra and the solar plexus. Those are the incarnate self. There's 3 chakras. That's 3-dimensional time and space. That's called the incarnate self, or the actual human self. When you move up to the 4th chakra, into the heart center, then you start to move into the soul. And the map that I particularly use, the soul is the 4th, 5th, and 6th chakra. And then there's the 7th chakra and beyond. And so the higher self is the 4th chakra and above in the terminology that I use. And so the soul is that envelope, that auric field that moves with us from incarnation to incarnation, and has a tremendous amount of information about who we are and what our karma is and our dharma is, and things that we're here to achieve and experience, and connects us with the higher intelligences. So the soul is a specific subset of the higher self, is the way that I would explain it. Okay. We'll come back and ask more questions. So now I want to talk about the science of facilitating. And I want you to have a sense of that, the art is what we primarily focus on in facilitating, but all of these points are sort of integrated in, and we touch on them and we use them. So I don't want you to have a sense of, being overwhelmed by them, because it's really dialoguing and negotiating and working with all the parts in the boarding house. But I do want you to get a sense as like this really is thought out and structured, and really includes the breadth and depth of what it means to be human. So the science piece of it, I have listed here Alchemy's 4 quadrants, our 5 vital intelligences, physical, emotional, mental, moral, and spiritual IQs, our 5 states of being. I was just talking about the incarnate and the soul, the 5 stages of the mystic's journey, and then the 7 archetypes. And if you're a Ken Wilber fan and integral philosophy fan, then these correspond to what Ken does in integral. These are a little more accessible and understandable. It's not quite a theory. So I've tried to make it a little more meaningful for me and for people. And I do have Ken's permission to translate integral into plain English. So here we go. But the important thing about all of these different elements in the science of facilitation is to bring these elements from being unconscious and swimming in the ocean of our unconscious and our collective unconscious, and bring them into consciousness, and then bring them into super consciousness as we evolve, as we grow as conscious being, as we embody more and more higher states of consciousness. Then we're bringing what is in the unconscious into the light, and integrating it into the light, and integrating it, and not only transforming it, but transmuting it into light itself. And so that's what sort of these different elements of the science of facilitating is focused on. So the first, Alchemy's 4 quadrants, you may have heard the famous dictate. It's the number 1 principle in alchemy: as above, so below; as within, so without. And that's the idea that, oh, what is happening within me is what happens without me in the world. What is happening in heaven is also what's happening in earth. And to frame that in a more modern perspective, it's the understanding that consciousness moves from the particle and the particles and the elements, the atoms and molecules and cells of our being, all the way through the complexity of our different body systems, and then into the actual realms of planetary cycles and galactic cycles and universal cycles and universal laws. And it's that continuum that every aspect of our being, from the particle of our atoms all the way to the multiverse, there is a continuum. And it's like, how much of that can we be conscious of and experience? And I'm here to tell you, when you can access the infinite, eternal, and immortal parts of your being, then that is a phenomenal amount that you can presence in your own body. As within, so without is very much about, oh, here I have a subjective experience that's happening to me, and yet outside of me, there is a three-dimensional world that's happening, and how am I perceiving it? And how clear is my awareness of what's happening in reality? Is it distorted by my biases and perceptions, or have I been able to cut through a lot of that dissonance and chaos and actually experiencing the world as it is? And that really is classic enlightenment, as it's been defined for thousands and thousands of years. So that's the four quadrants, from the microscopic all the way to the cosmic and the universal, everything that's happening inside as a human being, internal, and then moving outward, from the immediate people in my life to our tribes, our nations, our world, and even being citizens of the universe. And so, as within, so without. So that's the four quadrants of alchemy. And when you start to really bring all the different parts together, I like to think in terms of, we go from conflict within ourselves and conflict outside of ourselves till we come to a place of reconciliation. When I can reconciliate the parts within me, I can start to reconcile all the different personalities and characteristics in my life. And then from that place of harmony, then the great mystery starts to move, and that's where alchemy happens. That's where everything is transmuted to gold. Now, there's a bit of a misconception. We used to think, alchemy was about turning the base elements, the common metals, into gold itself. But it really is a metaphor for the transformational journey, the journey of the human into the angelic and into the mystical itself. In alchemy, that's called the great work. In the Western traditions, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism particularly, that's called enlightenment. So comments or questions about the alchemy before we move on? Okay. So next element are your 5 vital intelligences. And that's our physical intelligence, our emotional intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, our mental and our moral intelligences. And one, you can just call that body and heart and spirit and mind and will. But again, it's so many of these things are happening at an unconscious level. And can we bring them into consciousness? How many sensations of my body can I be present to? Can I be aware of where I am in my physical energy? Am I running on a deficit, or am I, fully honed and present? In my emotional energy, have I had a lot of destructive or toxic emotions moving through my day, or am I really present to, and can I actually choose to create more positive, healing, and loving emotions? And my mental energy, am I worrying and spinning and thinking about a lot of things that are beyond my control? Or am I able to laser focus my mind, which is classic meditation, mindfulness? Can I even visualize and create imaginary experiences with my mind to co-create the world that I want to create? Moral intelligence is really about will and discernment. Are my choices, are my habits in and out of my day in alignment with my highest spiritual values? And so that's what making these unconscious energies, making them into actual intelligences and bringing them into consciousness and evolving them into the superconscious aspect, because every one of these has a superconscious quality. I'll give you an example. My friend Richard Strozzi Heckler, one of my most primary teachers, was a runner, a track runner. And before he really began to study psychology in the 60s, he competed in the Pan American Games in Mexico City. And as he was running in peak performance in the middle of his race, his consciousness actually left his body and he watched himself run the race. And after he won the race, he actually won that race. And as his body finished and stopped, his consciousness was slammed back into his body. And so here he was completely winded. He had won the race and he's like, what the hell just happened to me? And so that began his journey into studying what had actually happened to him. How many times have you maybe heard the story of an athlete or a dancer or a martial artist or somebody who has mastered a physical skill talk about at a certain point, oh, the dance danced itself, the game played itself. So that's just one example of, focusing on physical intelligence. The same thing happens with emotional or spiritual intelligence or mental intelligence. We can move into the infinite, immortal parts of ourselves through each of these energies. But it's important to know that they're unique energies and we can sustain them. And it's important for any kind of healing, personal development, and certainly spiritual development, spiritual enlightenment, that we understand these are 5 different qualities of energies and that we must sustain each of them in their own unique way so that we have the energy to function at our best day in and day out. But particularly when you're doing the deep shadow work and you're really doing this deep harmonizing work, that you have the presence, the centered presence, but also just the energy and, that vision of who we could be, that vision of being a badass mystic, of being an evolutionary mystic, of being a revolutionary saint, of being a rascally sage. Whatever that vision for yourself is, it takes energy to embody that and sustain that. And that all actually comes from your physical body. So we have to tend the body. So that is, being aware of your 5 vital intelligences. And when you experience this work with me, I'm always coming back to what do you sense? What do you notice in the body? What are you noticing with the breath? I'm always bringing back what's the emotion you're sensing in your body right now? Or what's the thought that's accompanying that experience? I'm always grounding these mystical experiences in the physical sensations of your body in these different 5 frequencies. So any comments about that before we move on? Okay, great. So I'm hoping you guys, you're hanging in there. I know you're with me here, so wonderful. Thank you. I'm hoping this is making sense for you. Okay, so I want to your 5 states of being, and this is a essential mystical way where West and East meet together around mystical experiences. And so you notice I've now expanded spiritual intelligence to the 5 basic states of being. And number 1 is waking. But again, and Dolores, this speaks to what you were saying earlier about what's the difference between soul and higher self. So the waking state is our, everyday thinking self. It's the beta and alpha brain states of being. When we move to the heart chakra and above, we move into the dream state. These are the shamanic realms, the imagery of symbols and colors and light, and the way that the soul communicates with the self. So that's the dream state. And then we move even beyond that. This is the 7th, 8th, and 9th chakras, the deep sleep. This is often called the vast spaciousness. It's often called the causal state, and very, very still and spacious. And then when we move to the witness state, now a lot of enlightenment paths talk about the witness and being able to experience yourself as the witness. That is when you have completely transcended yourself. You have moved beyond the envelope of your auric field and your sense of self. And you've sort of popped out of that bubble, and you are starting to be and experience yourself as one with all things. And you're witnessing the universe's spin, and you're witnessing the atom's spin. And then that 5th spiritual realm is oneness. It's unity consciousness. It's non-dual awareness. It's like there is no separation between you and all that is. And so these are the 5 states of being. And so particularly when we're facilitating evolutionary mystic meditation, you can be guided into more and more subtle, deep states of being. You can be facilitated into the dream state. You can be facilitated into that causal state, that deep, deep sleep. You can be facilitated into witness, and then you can be facilitated into oneness, that sense of I am all that is. And so again, knowing these, what they are, but particularly the experience of them in your own body, helps you then hold the space as you're guiding other people to experience these states through their own body. And the true self, the authentic true self, is really the experience of all of these spiritual states together. But in classic enlightenment, it really is the witness and the oneness. In Japanese Zen, one of the paths that students follow to their awakening is koans. They're cosmic riddles. And one of the koans is, what was your parents' face before you were born? What was the face of your parents before you were born? So it really is pointing to your true nature. Your true self is this witness and oneness. It's unchanging, it's infinite, and it's eternal. That's Cliff Notes on enlightenment right there. Any questions before we go into that? Yes. Debbie says, wow, really interesting. Thank you. Kelsey says, yes. Chris Toner says, I love how you use the word sense versus feel. And that's a great, I'm glad you noticed that, Chris, because it's a great distinction. Because, feeling is, we use feeling to describe a lot of different experiences. I can use the word feeling. Oh, I feel a pain in my knee. That's a sensation. Oh, I feel an emotion. I feel anger. Or I feel sick or nauseous. Well, that's a state. Or I feel anxious. It's like my mind is spinning. So feeling is a confusing word. It's just, it's sort of like love. It means 101 different things. And so sensation, So Nancy just asked a great question. The lower levels of the spiritual are colored according to the chakras. Then you have a wide black band for the witness. Is there any meaning to that? Yes and no. The simple is that, when we move into the witness, it is that part of us that witnesses space. And within space, universes arise and universes fall away. Entire universes come and go. Galaxies come and go. Solar systems and stars come and go. Planets come and go. Civilizations come and go. Bodies come and go. And so the witness is in that field of pure potentiality. It's the awareness that out of nothing comes everything, and everything eventually returns to nothingness. So it's just that sort of unshakable awareness that is present to infinite nothingness, and then out of that infinite nothingness, entire universes, stars, billions of stars are born. So that's what I would say about that. Okay. Now here are the 5 stages of the mystic's journey. Now, how many of you are familiar with, we can look at Abraham Maslow's sort of hierarchy of needs. There is Piaget's sort of stages of child development. That sort of was in the early 1900s that really shaped a lot of thinking. Maslow, with his hierarchy of needs, really started to look at not only child development, but then adult development. And then there are a number of models that look at adult development and even cultural or human evolution, like spiral dynamics. And Ken Wilber's done his own version of that as well. And so what I would say to you, here is my image for the 5 stages of the mystic's journey. And the spiritual seeker, that's where we all start. Every one of you that's on this call and has stayed on this call, for 45 minutes, you're a spiritual seeker. You want to live your life in alignment with your spiritual values and your spiritual truths. And there's a part of you to know that there's resistance that keeps you from doing that, or that there's still something that feels incomplete and there's something more. And you're seeking that. So for me, that first stage is the spiritual badass. It is those skills of being able to recenter, sense and recenter your body, to recharge those 5 vital energies, and then to reset yourself, to move from the human, which is often riddled with self-doubt and insecurity and fear, into your higher selves, your mystical selves, your true selves. And you can do all that with intention and developing those skills to be able to do that. That's that spiritual badass first stage. And so just that being a spiritual seeker and spiritual badass, that's really the peak. When Maslow was talking about his 5 levels of hierarchy of needs and self-actualization, that's spiritual badass is my version of that. But notice that this map has actually 4 more stages of development than what Maslow wrote. And I'll say there's some really great new books out about Maslow that really looks at his personal writings and teachings after what became called the hierarchy of needs was published and printed in the 50s. And he really did speak to the higher stages of development, even beyond self-actualization and those peak experiences. But infinite stillness and divine love, stage 2 and 3, those are the aspects of the true self. In classic Eastern Enlightenment, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, they talk about your true self. And that's moving into the infinite, eternal, immortal parts of yourself and embodying that, stabilizing your awareness in those states. And I don't know if Kit is on this, but she asked a question yesterday about, speaking of beyond the beyond and the witness and big mind or Buddha mind or the stillness of pure being, those are all aspects of the divine masculine. And they're just sort of different qualities of awareness that you can experience. Now, they tend to be sort of that Buddha mind, that sort of opening into infinite stillness. Now, within the divine masculine, there are all the archetypes and avatars of the gods and the archangels, Archangel Michael, like that. That stage number 3, divine love, is very much about the divine feminine. It's the path of love. Now, most enlightenment practices have been dominated by the path of awareness, infinite stillness, and that is the masculine path. But more and more, there has been the path, and there's always been the path of divine love, of surrender, of love, of service. And so again, that's stage 3. But being able to access infinite stillness, access the battle goddess of compassion, access unconditional love at will, with intention. That's always the marker of embodying our true self. Can I at will move into that infinite, eternal, immortal part of myself, whether that's unconditional love or that's infinite stillness? And then about 700 years ago, we started to see in the teachings and the writings this shift. For a long time, infinite stillness or unconditional love was the end all be all in enlightenment. And then we started to see both in the Kabbalah and in Zen Buddhism particularly, they were starting to teach and write about, the next stages of enlightenment, the next stages of human development. And that was, moving from infinite stillness and unconditional love beyond the body to, let's move to the peak of a pyramid where we integrate all of the human and the body, and we integrate all the infinite, eternal, and immortal, and we stabilize ourselves at a new peak of consciousness. And that is where our soul purpose and our soul destiny, stages 4 and 5, are clearly available to us and revealed to us. And I'll give you a quick story about that. So Mahatma Gandhi, many of you know his story, but as a young man, he went to England to study law. And he was so shy and so timid. But in his time in England, he began to he had to go to England to actually discover the Bhagavad Gita. One of his English friends gave him the first copy of the Bhagavad Gita that he would read, even though he was from India and had grown up in India. And so in England, he began to find his path. And he graduated from law school in England, went back to India, and was petrified to speak in front of court. And he blew a case so bad that his family actually sent him to South Africa to work with one of the Hindu Indian law firms in South Africa. And once again, he was so afraid to speak in open court, and it looked like he might never have a career as a lawyer. But he was assigned to one case between two brothers that they were fighting. And he began to realize that how this conflict between the two brothers were destroying both families and the fortune that they had built and they were arguing over. And he began to work on reconciling their differences and finding a peaceful solution to their differences. And he actually did it. And he realized then that the essence of the law and the essence of his soul purpose and the essence of his soul destiny was to reconcile conflict wherever he found it. Now, as a lawyer, that was between cases, but that would ultimately lead him to his whole movement of nonviolence. To how can I find a moral solution to war, the biggest conflict between humans? So his destiny was revealed to him as he developed, as he embodied his spiritual practices, as he studied the Bhagavad Gita, as he studied the unconditional love of the Divine Mother, and chanted and prayed and studied and read, and that led him to his soul purpose and his soul destiny. And it's that committed practice to his daily rituals that revealed his soul purpose and soul destiny to him and allowed him to have the impact in the world that he was born to have. Now, we all have a destiny that was chosen for us. It was chosen by our soul in alignment with our soul and our soul team of what's possible for us in this lifetime. And in that soul destiny, there's a level of divine wealth and divine love and divine wealth and divine self-expression. And most of us spend a lot of time delaying or even denying our destiny because of our fears, because of our resistance, because of our conditioning. So the mystic's journey is very much about breaking through and transforming all of that resistance and bringing all those parts that are still contracted in fear and pain and love and allowing them to flower and evolve so that all of that energy can be now in service to our soul purpose and our soul destiny. And so whatever our unique soul destiny is, it is revealed to us. But for most of us, 9 out of 10 of us, we already have been living into it. What are our passions? What are our strengths? What are our gifts? What are our skills that we've already been cultivating in this life? But then how does that then align with our dharma, our true reason for being here? And how do our dharmas evolve over time? So these are the 5 stages of the mystic's journey. They're built on, classic adult development, but then based on the different stages of mystics and enlightenment over thousands of years. So I just said a lot, but I just want to check, is there any comments or questions? Nancy, yes to Maslow and Piaget, beautiful. Yeah. And, and I'm a huge fan of spiral dynamics and Ken Wilber. And they both speak to, humanity at being at a certain, straddling different stages of development. And, what does it take for the, the next step to happen? And I'm going to come back. And it was Dolores who talked about the difference between your soul and your higher self. So when we think in terms of the chakras, 94% of the world lives stuck in or trapped in the lower 3 chakras, which are primarily dominated by fear if they're not harmonized and balanced with love. So that means only 6% of the world's population can, with intention and at will, move into the heart center. Maybe they can't always live there, but they can at least, through prayer, through psychedelic plants, through fasting, through different practices of denial, through different rituals, they can at least move into the heart and open the heart. So that's only 6% of the world's population, but only 1% of the world's population can move into the 7th chakra with intention, at will, into that place of the infinite and the eternal and the immortal. So think about that. All the models of personal adult development really sort of peak out at the 6th and maybe starting to hint at the 7th chakra. But Ken Wilber has certainly said that when more and more people can move intentionally into the 7th chakra and beyond, then the world starts to change. And if you are familiar with David Hawkins' work, Power versus Force, he speaks of that a person that can intentionally move into the heart, which is love, and that's that frequency of 500. David Hawkins' scale was 0 to 1,000. That one person that can move into love offsets 35,000 people in the world who are still vibrating at a frequency of fear or below. So imagine the mystics, which is 800 and above. Imagine a community of mystics walking together, a tribe of mystics scattered around the world, doing their own unique work in the world, vibrating at 800 or higher, how much they can offset, and not only offset, but then invite that reconciliation of the people that are still trapped in suffering and fear, and help to elevate and uplift the people who are still at those lower frequencies of being and don't see any hope, don't see any help for themselves. So I think that's why it's so essential at this time in history that, one, we do our own work. Lori Layden was a speaker at my retreat, and she said over and over and over, she's had amazing work with trauma, working with orphans and widows of genocide in Rwanda, survivors of school shootings both in Newtown, Connecticut, and Parkland, Florida, and now she's working in Australia with the Aboriginals who have been through generational genocide. And helping to heal trauma. And she says over and over and over, you must be able to heal yourself. You must be able to reconcile yourself that is an abuser or a murderer or a perpetrator of genocide or shootings, to be able to truly be present with these people who've experienced deep trauma. So we've got to do the inner work before then we can truly be facilitators that have real impact in the world. So that's what I want to say about that. Any comments or questions before we move on? I'm just carrying on and on and on here. Okay, so the last thing that I want to really speak to is the 7 core archetypes. And so types is essential, and people talk a lot about different types, whether it's the Enneagram or astrology or the Myers-Briggs. There are a lot of different ways of looking at types. But I like to let's go to the essence here. And so the archetypes is sort of an idea that Carl Jung introduced us to. And it's the idea that there are these patterns and structures within every human being. There was something called the collective unconscious that is, over the evolution of humanity, from our primal ancestors and the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years that humans, then when we broke away from the chimpanzees and evolved into the humans we are, there are structures and patterns of being, of energy. And one of the best descriptions that I've heard of archetypes, they're like dry riverbeds in our psyche, in our soul. And that when certain energies or emotions are triggered, those dry riverbeds are flooded with flash floods of energy. And they're directed in certain ways, and different aspects of our psyche become illuminated and become active. And so these are 7 essential archetypes that I think that are essential to work with. At least these. There are many more. But one is the innocent. It's that innocent and vulnerable child. And every human being at some point loses their innocence in some way or form. And at that point, we become an orphan, or we can move into the victim or martyr energies. And then from that loss of innocence, from that orphan energy and karma, we move into the seeker. How do I solve my pain? The family that I was born into cannot sustain and hold me, and I must leave and find my own way. And in that seeking, in that wandering, beginning my own mystical hero's journey, then I move into the different archetypes of the psyche: the lover, the warrior, the magus, the magician, the high priestess, the high priest, and then the sovereign. And it is in one being aware of the unconscious, conscious, and superconscious aspects of these archetypes that helps us to really move into being that fully functioning, fully integrated, badass mystic. And we could spend an entire workshop on this, but I just wanted to explain one. And this is the sovereign energy. And this is the Empress and the Emperor cards from the Tarot. And this is the sovereign. And so an example of unconscious sovereign energy is the tyrant. The disowned sovereign energy is the tyrant or the victim. When I do not embody and own my own authority and my own sovereignty as a spiritual being, then I'm disowning my empress, or I'm disowning my emperor, my king or my queen. And so I either am a conscious or unconscious tyrant and bully in the world, or I am always looking outside of myself from that poor me perspective of I need somebody to save me or fix me or help me. I'm looking for that knight in shining armor. And I think that one thing that we see in the world, this rise of nationalism and these sort of strong men like Putin and the leader of Brazil. We have a couple of Brazilians here, in Italy. You know, when we see this in China, we see this rise of authoritarian leaders. It's because we have disowned our own sovereignty. We've disowned our own king or queen. And so we, in our uncertainty and confusion and fear, we need a tyrant. We need an authoritarian leader to take care of us. And so one of the prescriptions for authoritarianism is for each of us actually is to embody and own our own sovereign in a completely conscious and superconscious way. So if the unconscious expression of these energies is a tyrant, then the conscious is really moving into, oh, I am the master of my own fates. And then when we move into the super conscious, we start to look at the kings and queens of heaven and how each of those can be embodied. And then ultimately there is the sacred marriage where the empress and the emperor is truly merged within our own psyche. And that is the true essence of the seat of the soul sitting on its throne of sovereignty. And so that's one of the promises of just embodying this archetype. So, comments or questions? Yes. So a couple of great questions. So Anna Deere says, awesome explanations. Nancy, how far along do we need to be to help facilitate someone else with their journey? Well, one, I would say that's a great question. And, you know, one is to be skillfully working with activating and accessing the infinite immortal parts of yourself and skillfully working with those parts in the basement. And, you know, when you're doing that work, one, people that you're destined to help will find you and come to you. The problem with a lot of therapists and healers is they have amazing spiritual skill sets, but they haven't done the deep healing and shadow work. And so you run the risk of, you know, hurting people. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that. So, you know, but if you're truly on your mystic's evolutionary journey, and if you are really in that centered place and, you know, activating and embodying your mystical self and skillfully, compassionately, fiercely loving those parts of you that are still lost in shadow and darkness, then you're doing your work. You're doing your true soul's work in the world and the people that you're destined to help. Marianne Williamson used the phrase once, to be half a step ahead. So if you're truly committed to your rituals and your practice and you're half a step of other people, then you can guide them and you can help them. So Anna Deere says, Carolyn Mace has an excellent work about archetypes. Absolutely, she does. And And it's beautiful work. And she's really partnered with someone who knows a lot of the Jungian archetypes. I come a little bit more of the classic archetypes. Jungian, come out of the Jungian school. That's a little bit more my twist on it. But Carolyn Mace has done amazing work to, Jungian, Carl Jung is really, really hard to read, people. I'll tell you that. And a lot of Jungians are hard to read. There are a few that are excellent and easy to read that I love. So Carolyn Mace has done a fantastic job of making this available in everyday English so that we can all understand it. Can you help us with the shadow work? Absolutely. That's the whole essence of working with the boarding house and all the selves. And, the key, Anna dear, that I would say for me or for anybody that's going to help you is you have to have a practice of centering and recentering and recentering and recentering. Because as you start to embody these infinite immortal energies, when you start to go into the basement and intentionally, gently, skillfully invite these parts of us that have been really traumatized or defended, then energy starts to move. We had an experience the other day. We were a call with our Badass Mystic tribe, and we were working with the energies of judgment, and how painful judgment can be in the making of judgments, but also on the receiving end of judgments. And a lot of energy was stirred up, and that showed up as headaches, and I feel like I've gone in 5 minutes like I've got a full-blown sinus infection. I've got all this energy moving in my body. And it's like, okay. And we just worked with coming back to center, being present to the energy, the emotions, and letting the energy run its course until the body could calm and relax and come back to center. So anyone that's going to help you with shadow work, make sure they really understand the movement of energy in the body, and that you are using practices that'll help you come back to center. Okay, so we're almost done here with the presentation. Thank you so much. So I just want to remind you, it's like, if you take on this, you're on your mystic's journey, whether you realize it or not. You may not call it that, but you're already on that process, moving from a spiritual seeker to what I call a spiritual badass. Really showing up and standing and living your spiritual truths and your spiritual values in the world. And being able to go toe-to-toe with your fears and anxieties and insecurities and doubt to keep standing your sacred ground. But then there is that promise of your badass mystic, speaking your truth with love, setting boundaries with courage and kindness, doing your absolute best, 100% best at every turn, cutting through chaos with clarity, meeting crisis with creativity, making money with divine purpose, dancing and laughing and loving with delight, no matter what the circumstance is, and always being in awe of the mystery, being in wonder. So that's really the possibility. And to be a fully functioning, fully integrated human being, you need to be aware of, here are the elements of alchemy. Here are the different intelligences that exist within my body that every human being has. Here are the different states of spiritual awakening, from the incarnate, the soul, from waking and sleeping and deep sleep and witness and oneness. I was like, and I can experience all of them consciously, intentionally. And then there are different stages of development. I as a human being am going through different stages. My reality and my perceptions will change, and how I relate to other people at different stages will change. And that's where that fierce compassion and kindness is so essential. And then the essential archetypes, and being able to know, where am I still functioning from an unconscious aspect of my innocent, or my orphan, or my lover, or my warrior, or my magician, or my king. And where am I more conscious and stable, and where am I more super conscious in those? So being a free functioning, fully integrated human being, being a badass mystic, is one, being aware at some level of all of these aspects of your being and being able to manage them. In Buddhism, we call it skillful means. It's a whole thing. It's an enlightened state of being, skillful means of being able to manage your reaction and response to every moment so that you show up in the most appropriate way. So once again, any more comments or questions? And then I'm going to move into an invitation. So yeah. Thank you very much for these precious comments. Anna dear, you're welcome. Dolores, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Can you tell I'm passionate about this? Can you tell I love this? It's my work. Okay, so that's it for the free training that I promised you. And now a few words from our sponsor. That would be me and Evolutionary Mystic Meditation. So if you are inspired, I would like you to consider being in our 2021 Certified Facilitator Training. It actually starts next month in December. And this program is for you if you want to learn the skills of facilitating these kinds of mystical experiences for the important people in your life. If you're a healer, a teacher, a therapist, or a coach, and you really want to help people, or you simply want to be more deeply embody your own badass mystic self. I have several friends who've done this certification training just because it puts the whole process on light speed, on jet fuel. So a reminder, Evolutionary Mystic Meditation is the synthesis of Carl Jung's active imagination, voice dialogue by Hal and Citra Stone, Big Mind, Big Heart by Genpo Roshi, EFT tapping, deep shadow work, and my own somatic work. And I've tried to really seamlessly integrate them. You don't really know where one stops and one starts. It really is this evolutionary mystic meditation. The art and science of facilitating evolutionary mystic meditation, that's the emphasis of this year-long certification training. It's facilitating the voices of your human self, your true self, and your badass mystic self. It's really getting comfortable with the many different voices in your boarding house and being able to facilitate them, dialogue, shift into them, ask questions, listen to their wisdom, listen to their fears, listen to their expectations, and then bring that all back to your center. And then from accessing the infinite, eternal, immortal voices and parts of your soul, to then go into the basement with courage and kindness and gentleness and facilitate those voices of resistance. And underneath all those voices of resistance, there are the wounded children, the wounded parts of you that have been contracted, and they're still holding the pain and the fear of those experiences in your psyche. And you've got to be able to skillfully, kindly, gently work with them until they are ready to trust you and to let the love that you're holding for them in, so that they can begin to open and flower and begin to heal and grow. So embodying the 5 stages of your mystic's evolution journey, we just went over that. The spiritual seeker into a spiritual badass, to your true self embodying infinite stillness, your true self embodying divine love, your evolutionary mystic embodying your soul purpose, and the evolutionary mystic embodying your soul's destiny. And all of those together makes you one badass mystic. So really understanding that map and the experiences of that map, and waking up to your true self, your evolutionary mystic and your badass mystic, healing up, transmuting resistance, and reconciling all of yourselves, and then really showing up in the world, making the impact in the world that you're destined to have. And so that's, what are the promises of this year together. And then really working with these 7 essential archetypes. That's the final quarter of our time together. The first 3 quarters are really about the art of facilitation, facilitating the infinite, eternal, immortal parts, facilitating the resistance, and then moving into these 7 essential archetypes and working the unconscious, conscious, and superconscious states of being. So your training includes 4 2-day retreats. So that's 4 2-day retreats. You have the option of doing them virtually. They'll be done over Zoom. And for those of you who saw how we did our retreat 2 weekends ago, or actually it was last weekend, wasn't it? 2 weekends ago. You saw the skill and the caliber and the quality of the retreat that I created. So you can do it virtually, or you can come to Houston. Who knows what travel will be like through next year. I'm a firm believer in that I learn best in a live environment. So I know people have already said they want to come live, and if that's feasible, that's great. There were about 10 people in the ballroom where I broadcast my retreat 2 weeks ago. There are 216 people registered from 16 different countries. And then, we have people live, so we'll be doing both. There are 24 2-hour sessions over the year. That's twice a month, 2 a month. That's the first and third Tuesdays. And we actually start Tuesday the 1st of December at 12 p.m. Central Time. So it'll be from 1 to 3 Eastern, 12 to 2 Central. So that's the basis of your training, and we're going to unpack all the things that we talked about. And there'll also you'll be asked to read a book a month, where you're really diving into some of the sources of the work that has really inspired me. And the first book we're going to read is Embracing Ourselves by Hal and Sidra Stone. So that'll be our book for December. I know December's a lot. We're going to start easy. We'll just have a couple of sessions. And then I know we'll move into the holidays. We'll be having our first quarter 2-day retreat towards the end of January or February. We'll work that out amongst the people who register. The book for January will be Big Mind, Big Heart by Genpo Roshi. Again, these are primary teachers to me. And then the bonuses that you get, the quarterly one-on-one session with me. You have a private session with me, an hour session. And I haven't really talked about this, but I'm really a very successful online marketing person. I help a lot of spiritual and heart-centered business people launch products on the internet. And people literally pay me $20,000 to spend 2 days with them to design a marketing plan for their online business. So to have an hour of my time laser focused on you is a valuable thing for me, and I hope certainly a valuable thing for you. Our monthly membership is Badass Mystic Tribe, and that is a 12-month membership. You'll get it complimentary for the year. I think it's $917 or something like that for the year, $77 a month. And then there'll be a Facebook facilitator community. So that the bonuses that you get. So if you want to apply to be in this 2021 Evolutionary Mystic Meditation certification training with me and a small group of other people, it's limited to 10 people. And I will say that some of my other facilitator graduates and alumni have been invited to audit. They'll be there to support you and help you. Joe and Marion Hirsch, who are, two of my dear friends and beloveds and teachers and friends and students. They've been at every single facilitator training retreat that we've done since 2016. And they have agreed to join us. In addition to the 10 people who take this journey this year, you've got a lot of love and support, a container to really help you in your own journey and to crack the code on facilitating this course. So if you would like to talk to me about joining this training, and what it would take, and if you're a good match and we're a good match for you, and what the investment is. This is my personal email address, alan.davidson.1958@gmail.com. I know we got a lot going on with the holidays. It's Thanksgiving in America next week. But I want to make time to have a conversation with you, and a reminder that we do start on Tuesday, December 1st at 1 o'clock Eastern, from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. So I'm going to leave this up. Again, I'll put my email address, personal email address, in the chat so you have that. And we'll go from there. There you go. All right. So Kelly, I'm wondering which Kelly this is. So Kelly, just let me know which Kelly you are. They got a couple Kellys I love, and maybe you're a new Kelly. Anna dear, love to join in. Great. Well, then email me and let's set up a conversation, particularly in the next couple of days if we could, and just I can answer any questions you have, but we can go. Dave, I loved it all. Thank you, Dave, for your time and attention. Son says, thank you, Alan. Wonderful. Fabulous. Debbie says, thank you so much. Chris says, that was amazing. Thank you, Alan. Chris, I can't wait I'm hoping to make the pilgrimage north to Montgomery and see your new place. Any other questions that you have? I mean, we've talked a lot. Will there be recordings? Because the time will be after midnight in Japan. Mika, are you asking about this recording, or are you talking about during the day on Tuesday? Yes, they'll be everything's recording, and you have lifetime access to them. They'll be up, really for the whole year for you. And then what I do is I put everything in a zip file for you, and it lives on your computer. You own it. It's yours. So I'm a firm believer, you make an investment like this of your time, attention, and energy, then you should own the recordings. So, I like it when I get to own the recordings, because I really do go back and listen to different modules of things. It's like, what did they say then? What was that? How did they say that? What was that experience? What was that facilitation process? And in closing, I want to tell you a story. We just got a couple more minutes here. Most of the retreats we've done actually in my living room, in my home, because there really has been a small amount of people, 6, 7, 8 people. I think we've had 11 people with me. So that's a dozen in my home. And I do live in a small, beautiful old bungalow in what's left of Bohemia in Houston. But I do happen to live right across the street from a Whole Foods. And down the street, there are 2 Airbnbs. And so people have really, camped out, have fun. We were, one of the things I love about this is that, this ability to facilitate the parts is a skill. And there are a number of certifications around parts work. But the being able to facilitate into the infinite, eternal, and immortal parts of yourself is also a skill. And one, it really is leveraging your intention and trusting and knowing that those states of consciousness and being have been around long before the earth and the sun. They're frequencies of consciousness that are moving through the universe. But one of my joys is being able to facilitate another person, and they have the experience through their body of their true self, of their infinite, eternal, immortal stillness of their soul, or that fierce compassion of the battle goddess, or the unconditional, infinite, inexhaustible love of the Divine Mother, when they sense that through their own body. But I remember a time during one of our retreats when Carolyn McGee was facilitating the group. And that's one of the ways we learn is we go around and we facilitate different parts. And by the way, you have scripts. You get all the scripts. I write scripts. I encourage you to, and then make them your own. Find the words and the phrases that work for you. And Carolyn was facilitating the Divine Mother, that primordial divine feminine that is unconditional love, and that is the source and the midwife of all the universes. It's that part of us that distills energy into matter itself through divine love. And Carolyn was facilitating that and leading us and tapping us. And at a certain point, the energy in the room completely shifted. And I noticed Kai across the table and at the end of the table had tears streaming down her face. And then Marion, who was sitting next to me, her breathing shifted. And there was such a surprised look in Carolyn's face, because she knew that she was the one holding the space and facilitating the people in the room to have an experience. And everyone in the room was quite a sophisticated spiritual seeker of their own. They'd all done a lot of things. Marion and Joe had done phenomenal things. They were a generation older than me. And when Carolyn realized that she had held that experience of love, that people like Joe and Marion and Kai and the other people in the room could actually experience a quality of love that moved them and opened their heart and healed a part of them that had not yet been ready to open, she was so humbled to realize that, she was surprised. She might have been a little shocked, but she was humble that she had tapped into that skill to create an experience for people to have a healing. And so what I just want to leave you with is that, there's lots of great parts work that you can study, but being able to connect people into that infinite, eternal, immortal parts of their soul and their true self is a skill. And most people can do it. Most people can do it. The only people that I've seen that haven't been able to actually facilitate it are people that are on psychiatric drugs or, unfortunately, recreational drugs, or have some sort of brain trauma. Everyone else that I've worked with can develop that skill. And that's one of the most wonderful things that you can do for yourself. And it's certainly one of the most wonderful skills you can bring to the important people in your life. So that's what I would say. I'd love to have you, if you're so called to learn this work and facilitate this work, then I'd love to have you. So send me an email, alan.davidson.1958 at gmail.com. So thank you, everybody. A couple of minutes over time. I so appreciate you, and blessings to you, and have a great day wherever you are in the world. And thank you for your precious time and attention. Bye-bye.